Hello, community. I am a 29-year-old woman living in the United States, and this happened a few months ago with a family I work for. I didn't believe in strange things until this experience occurred while I was babysitting. Currently, I take care of 3 little ones, a 10-year-old girl, an 8-year-old boy, and the youngest, a 4-year-old girl. I've been looking after them since the youngest was a baby. I've never had serious problems with them, just the usual tantrums, but I love them as if they were my own children. One day, their mother called me to take care of them for several days, while she and her husband went on a trip. The first few nights went by without any problems, nothing out of the ordinary. However, the 4th night was when it all began. We were watching cartoons until it was time for bed. The youngest was the hardest to put to sleep because she was always full of energy. The 3 children slept in the same room because the 8-year-old's room was under repair. When I finally managed to get the little one to sleep, I went downstairs to watch my favorite show. Suddenly, after a few minutes, I heard the alphabet toy belonging to the little one, a toy with letter buttons for kids to learn. I thought she had gotten out of bed and was playing. A bit annoyed, I got up from the couch and went upstairs, opened their bedroom door, and saw that all 3 were sound asleep. There were no toys on the floor. I checked inside the closet where all the toys are kept but couldn't find it. I was a bit confused because I clearly heard it upstairs. At that moment, I heard the toy downstairs. This toy has a button that says, ABC, come sing with me, followed by a small laugh. That's exactly what I heard. My stomach dropped, and I was frozen with fear because of how disturbing the situation was, as I knew for sure the little one hadn't taken the toy downstairs that day. I went down quietly and saw the toy on the dining table. I was frozen again because it wasn't there before. Then I approached the toy and noticed it was off, but it said, ABC, come sing with me, just as I touched it. I jumped in fright and immediately took out the batteries. The 10-year-old girl called my name from the top of the stairs and asked what was happening. Not wanting to scare her, I told her it was nothing and to go back to bed. I didn't know what to think of this. I placed the batteries in the kitchen drawer and went to check on the kids. The 10-year-old girl was sitting on her bed when she saw me. I sat next to her and told her everything was fine. "Liar," she said. "You're scared." I put on a confused expression and then said, "No, I just had a nightmare, that's all." She slowly shook her head. "No, it's not true. Sebastián scared you." "Who is Sebastián?" I asked. She lay down facing the wall. "Don't let him scare you. He just wants to play with the little one's toy." Now I was very confused and scared. I didn't want to ask her more questions. I couldn't sleep that night. The 10-year-old also heard the toy. She's really used to this. The next night I was able to sleep a little because nothing strange happened until the early hours of the morning. I heard whispers outside my door. It was still dark, and I rubbed my eyes to see where the noises were coming from. They were coming from the kids' room opposite mine. I opened the door slowly and saw the 10-year-old girl sitting on the carpet. She looked at me in surprise. "What are you doing awake?" I asked, and she simply replied, "Nothing." "Go to bed, it's too early to be up." "Who were you talking to?" The 10-year-old just looked at me with a blank expression. "I heard you. I know you were talking." And she replied seriously, "Sebastián is upset because you're not paying attention to him. He wants you to take care of him too." Every hair on my body stood up. I told her to please go to bed, and that we would talk about this later, but she interrupted me saying no, that Sebastián wanted my attention now, in a louder and slightly annoyed tone. At that moment, the other 2 kids also woke up. The 8-year-old boy growled at his sister, telling her that Sebastián had to leave me alone. It was then that I asked if they also knew about Sebastián. They all nodded. Fortunately, their parents were returning that same day because I wanted to get out of there as quickly as possible. Later, the 10-year-old girl didn't want to eat the plate of food I made for her, unlike her siblings who had no problems and were playing in the yard. I complained that she hadn't touched her food in a long time. By this point, I was getting irritated, but then she looked at me annoyed and said, "Where is Sebastián's food?" I decided to play along and asked where Sebastián was now. she responded, laughing that he was holding onto my leg. I felt chills in my legs when she said that, but I tried to stay calm and not look scared. Well, Sebastian, if you don't sit down, I won't serve you food. The 10-year-old smiled as she looked at where I was standing. At this point, I really hoped their parents would arrive soon. I served the plate and placed it where the girl said he was sitting. He says, "Thank you," said the girl, and for some reason, that made me feel a little better. Half an hour after that incident, their parents arrived. Once they settled their things and greeted us, the mother looked at the plate of food and smiled, asking why it was there. The kids were already outside playing with their father, so I lowered my voice and told her what the children had said, that there was a boy here wanting my attention. Her eyes widened, and she only mentioned, "Sebastian." "Please tell me this is true," I asked her with a trembling voice. She sat me on the couch and asked me to tell her everything that had happened. When I told her about the toy, she remembered that this happened every night, but they had gotten used to it over the years, and I honestly don't know how they managed. She then explained that the family who lived there before had a son who died in the house, and weeks after the tragedy, they decided to leave. Shortly after, her family moved in, when the 10-year-old girl was a baby. When she was able to talk and walk, the mother noticed how she talked to herself and seemed to play with someone. She said Sebastian was sad and always wanted to play, especially at night. The mother thought it was just an imaginary friend, but over time the girl made it seem real that someone was there. She remembered hearing her argue with literally no one, and how one of her toys disappeared and then reappeared in the locked shed they have in the yard. It was impossible for her to have put it there. This scared the parents, and they decided to investigate the house's history, hoping nothing tragic had happened, but it had. That's when they found out about the little boy who had died, but they didn't have much information about it. This left them very disturbed, but in the end, they decided they would have to deal with it since this boy wasn't harming anyone. It was also clear that only the 10-year-old girl could communicate with Sebastian. The other two children couldn't, but grew up knowing he was their older sister's friend. When they noticed she stayed up late playing and talking, they simply told her to stop and to tell Sebastian it was time to sleep. Her mother told me she had already said that Sebastian liked me since I started taking care of them, but she didn't tell me anything because it might scare me or I wouldn't believe them. But now you see that Sebastian desperately wanted your attention. It would really make us very sad to see you leave and no longer be with my family, but if that's what you decide, it's understandable. She told me with total calmness. Of course, this happened unexpectedly, and in the years I've been taking care of these children, I had never experienced anything like this. Maybe Sebastian really wanted attention after so long. Besides, I couldn't leave my kids. I really see them as my own. So I decided to continue taking care of them. Nothing out of the ordinary happened, so to speak, other than some things being moved around or simply appearing out of nowhere, like that first time. Little by little, I've gotten used to it, but it's not easy. I've never believed in these things, but when you experience them firsthand, you can't help but change your mind. Hello, my name is Felipe, and I am over 50 years old. However, every time I remember that night, I feel like I'm 16 again. My friend Juan and I were looking to make some extra money and thought babysitting kids in the neighborhood would be an easy way to do it. We put an ad in the local newspaper and soon received several calls. We became popular and started getting jobs from all over. Our only condition was to work together. Aside from the occasional troublesome kid, it was fun, and we made good money. One night, a woman called us desperately asking us to take care of her child. She offered to pay us double, so we accepted. Juan had a driver's license, so he drove while I got a few things ready. I packed our food and we headed to the house. The trip took longer than expected, and when we arrived, we found a note on the door saying it was open. It seemed strange that the mother would leave the door unlocked, but we didn't think much of it. We went inside and noticed a weird smell, a mix of dampness and cleaning products. The house was old, with wooden floors that creaked with every step. We called for the child, but there was no answer. We searched the kitchen, upstairs, the bathroom, and the laundry room. We went to the bedrooms, thinking maybe the child was already asleep, but we didn't find him. This started to make us nervous. There were no toys or children's clothes in sight. We were going down the stairs to call the mother when we saw a partially open door we hadn't noticed before. My friend and I walked towards it, and he pushed it open slowly. Then we saw it. A life-sized doll sitting on a child's bed staring at us. We were paralyzed, not knowing what to do. Then the phone in the kitchen rang. We quickly went to answer it. I picked up the phone, and the mother was on the other end. She asked us to get the child ready for bed and to make sure he was in bed by a certain time. Then she told me that his pajamas were on his bed where he was sitting. My stomach turned. "You mean the doll, right?" I asked. And she immediately hung up. Juan looked at me and asked what she had said. I just looked at him and said, "I think this woman believes that doll is her child." Juan laughed, but then realized I was serious. He asked if I wanted to leave, and I immediately responded that we should get out of that house. We ran out, but when we reached the porch, Juan tapped my shoulder asking what was that, pointing to the ground. We walked to take a closer look, and among the perfectly trimmed grass there was a tombstone. It read, "Here rests little Andres, 1972 to 1979. Over the years, I have tried to rationalize what we experienced that night. Maybe the woman suffered from some kind of trauma or mental illness that made her believe the doll was her child. Or maybe it was all some kind of macabre joke. But what unsettles me the most, even after all this time, is the inexplicable connection between the doll and the tombstone. We never babysat again after that disturbing experience. In fact, when I remember that night, I can still feel the chill that ran down my spine when I saw the tombstone. Although Juan and I are still friends, we very rarely talk about that incident. Good evening, community. My name is Ileana. On the night of this experience, I was taking care of my 3 younger sisters. I rarely see them since I didn't have a good relationship with my father, which led me to live with my mother. My father always had excuses for me to go to his house or said things to manipulate me. Although this story isn't about my father, he was very abusive to me during my childhood and with my mother when they were together. I love my sisters very much, but I know they are safe at my father's house. I was the eldest sister, and I think that's why they treated me the way they did. It was a recent year, and at that time, my father lived in a large, beautiful house. The D sign is confusing, but I will try to explain it as best as I can. The bedrooms of 2 of my sisters, the older ones, were in the basement, so to speak, as it wasn't really a basement but where the garage was, as well as the back doors leading to the pool and garden. Basically, when you went down the stairs, you could see the downstairs living room, and then, beyond that, my sisters' bedrooms. Just before their rooms, there was a guest room that had a closet, a storage room, and a bathroom inside. It was also very open, as it was supposed to have a barn door, but there was only a door frame without a door. When you went up the stairs at the top, there were 2 doors, one leading to the kitchen and the other leading to the youngest sister's room. At that time, the youngest was around 5 years old, while the other 2 were 10 years old. It was night, and we were all relaxing in the basement. I had accidentally knocked down the curtains of the back door because I opened it too much. This happened quite often, so it was no surprise. The girls didn't like it when the curtains were down since they were 2 glass doors, and it was late at night, which meant it was completely dark outside. We lived in the woods, and there were animals around. I didn't feel like looking for a stool to put them back, so I told them I would do it later and sat back on the couch to continue watching TV. The girls were playing school or something like that. I didn't join because the youngest prefers the older ones over me, which hurts a bit, but I understand. It was already past her bedtime, but I had allowed her to stay up a bit longer to spend time with us, knowing she would be upset if we had fun without her. I planned for the older girls and me to watch a movie after the little one went to bed. I asked the older ones to take the little one upstairs so I could clean up the mess. The 3 of them ran up the stairs into the little one's room, slamming the door shut. From downstairs I could hear them laughing loudly, and I didn't want the little one not to sleep, so I shouted from the basement for them to put her pajamas on while I looked for a stool in the guest room. All the laughter stopped, assuming they were helping their little sister get ready for bed. I then put the stool by the window and grabbed the curtain to put it back up when suddenly, I heard footsteps coming down the stairs. I didn't hear the little one's door or the kitchen door open or close. I didn't turn around, assuming it was one of the girls. In the reflection of the glass, I saw the top of someone's head behind the couch. I turned around, confused as to why they would be behind the couch like that unless they were planning to scare me. I stayed on the stool while I watched someone walk into the guest room. They were the height of the youngest, so I thought it must be her. I got off the stool and then went into the guest room, planning to scare who I assumed was the little one. And well, when I entered the guest room, I looked around and saw no one. I looked under the desk, around the bed, and nothing. I thought maybe they had gone into one of the 3 doors in the room, but all those doors were very creaky, and they were all closed. Honestly, I was scared, so even though the girl might be scared of being alone downstairs, I skipped checking behind those doors, then turned around and ran up the stairs. I entered the little one's room and did a quick head count. All 3 were there. I don't know what I had just seen. Who did I see walk behind me? I was trembling. I have had a panic attack disorder for a long time and have to take medication to prevent them. A few tears can turn into a full-blown panic attack. I didn't want to scare my sisters, so I simply asked if any of them had been downstairs, which they all denied. I was upset but hid it as best as I could. Eventually, the little one fell asleep, and the older ones and I went downstairs to watch a movie. I just wanted to relax and think that what I saw was just a reflection or my imagination. Time passed and it got very late. The girls were asleep on the couch and I stayed awake. Suddenly, something made me feel like I needed to look at the reflection in the glass doors. The curtains were still open, and that's when I looked out the window and, to my surprise, I saw that small person or thing again. Now it was in front of the back door. It's embarrassing to say because I really like the paranormal, but I quickly hid under my blanket and started crying quietly until I fell asleep, forcing myself to think that what I saw wasn't real. I woke up before the other girls, so I decided to get up and take a look around the house. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, just something to explain. What the hell had I seen the night before? Once the girls woke up, I continued acting as if nothing had happened. I ended up telling the 2 older girls privately, not wanting the little one to hear. They probably thought I was crazy, which I understand. Even I thought I might be crazy for seeing things that weren't there, but now I don't know what to think. Eventually, my parents came home and I told them, but they also thought I was making it all up. Later on, my father and sisters moved out. I never had an explanation for what happened that night, whether what I saw was a product of my imagination, or if something was really with us and watching us from the darkness.